There you go.
So,
in the light as well.
this is just kind of a unofficial get together because Matt reached out yesterday asking some questions about how we're using it's the system. It's really Soviet wave, volume periodization, all that stuff. But and I was thinking that she had some great questions, and but to type those questions out would have been kind of an extensive experience. So I suggested a phone call, and then of course Robbie and I have been talking about doing something like this about this topic, kind of as a clinic type thing. But so I reached out to him and just thought maybe we could get some practice with it, invite just a few people and get a little bit of practice with it and get to have some good conversation. I was telling Robbie, I've got a presentation that we could dip into a little bit. I'm speaking a webinar. I'm doing a webinar with that Legacy Sports Performance. I think the first week of May, he said, there's a lot of big name dudes. So they're letting a lot of, those guys are going. I think he's even got Tony Holler on there and stuff like that.
Yeah.
John, I haven't gotten to that point of the video where Tony Holler and Aaron Feld get into an argument yet, but I'm really excited for it.
Did that happen on the second?
Well, they don't actually get into an argument, but he shows a picture of Feld, and he flat out says, this guy does nothing to get his athletes faster. All he's doing is, they're just recruiting better athletes. If you want to see somebody that can actually get athletes faster, they should have stuck with Jim Radcliffe.
Oh,
I saw that.
Well, I was in on the first meeting. Does this happen in the McClure, Tony Holler thing? The second one? I was in on the first one, and he had a picture of him on the screen and dogged him out in that first one. I thought, oh, my God.
That's what I was talking about.
That's wrong.
Matthew, were you on the first one?
No, I didn't get to the first one. I didn't make it in time, but I got the second one.
Yeah, nobody said anything when he was going through. I mean, nobody really wasn't commenting. And so Phil was on the second one with him. He was a spectator. He piped up. Wow.
Yikes.
Yeah, listen, I don't agree with everything that Tony Holler says. He does some great things, and I love a lot of stuff he does. But there are 2 or 3 things he has said in print and in presentations that are just patently scientifically false. And so you take what you can use and you forget the rest.
But anyway, so we just decided to just kind of get everybody together today and kind of talk about it. But like I said, I have this presentation, but we could get into it if we want. I'm going to leave it up there just to kind of guide my thought processes, but on my screen up here. But I really thought we'd just kind of talk about it a little bit, and we just all discuss. That's not the cool thing about the small group here. Down in the corner, if you're on the big screen, that's Matt Erdman. He's actually he's really volunteer assistant, less of an intern and more of a volunteer assistant. There's Coach Boyd. He's our head football coach. He just got in too. So there's some other York guys on. But yeah, I just thought, as opposed to putting the presentation up, we just have a discussion about it and answer some questions. And we just go from there and see where it kind of leads us.
Guys, if y'all decide y'all want to see some of the stuff that he's talking about on his presentation, I can share it with them from my screen, or you can, either one.
I got the whole gallery view. Can you make it so it's like of course it was so small. I haven't really, I've got to expand. I got to make I haven't finished the whole presentation yet. So the type would be a little bit small to put it up in a small screen, but yeah, we can do that too. But anyway, the system, so it's a book. I didn't actually learn it from the book. I was lucky enough to just kind of stumble upon it. And it led to, it's kind of like when you say the system, we're going to probably talk a lot about, like some of Maddie's questions were about the how you progress your athletes, the volume progressions, and things like that, and just kind of logistics of it. But I think what you got to think about it is it's not just that. If you're going to use the system, you really have to be a big believer in the details of kind of the Soviet method of just how they do things, because that matters. It's kind of like back in my old life as a football coach, you know, I was a big wing T guy, and the number one mistake that I would see other wing T coaches making was they would say, we're going to run a little bit of buck sweep, but we're also going to put in the triple option. And then, you know, we're going to do some spread passing concepts with it, you know, and I'd just be like, you know, the main thing, one thing I did like that Tony Holler said on there was where he said the main thing is the main thing. And it's just like with any football, you know, system or basketball system, you have to be a big believer in it as a system and not just X's and O's. So I'm going to kind of just explain a little bit about that. So the Soviet, and I've got my presentation in front of me, but the big thing I said is in the beginning of this was of my presentation was kind of the number one thing that people that are detractors of kind of this Eastern Bloc way of looking at things say is, well, it was the drugs. That's the reason that the Eastern Bloc dominated power sports from from post World War II right up until, you know, the fall of the Soviet Union, and still today to some. And that's really kind of not the truth. There was a system of, and I need to like clarify that I'm not the expert in the Soviet system. I'm someone that has made learning from the experts in this system something that I'm very passionate about because I'm a big believer in it. But basically, there was this whole thing we're talking about stems from the Soviet Union and their desire to dominate the world being so strong that they went to endless cost, no cost spared to figure out the best way to train a power sport athlete for transfer to a sport as opposed to the weight room. And Michael Yesus, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Yesus, he's best known for the 1x20 system, which isn't even really the system. If you ever hear him talk, they had, this is just their general prep system that they use, and him and kind of his protege, Joseph Johnson, who is someone that I follow closely too, basically came up with a fancy name for their GPP system of 1x20, but he's kind of famous for that. He had a chance to spend time in the Soviet Union in the late 80s, wrote a book about it called The Secrets of Soviet Sports Fitness and Training. Actually, I have it right here. I reference it a lot. It's a great book, so you get a chance. It's like $25 on Amazon. It's like hand-drawn pictures of Soviet, you know, machines that they used and different things. It's pretty cool, but it's got a lot of great information. And he basically just said that it's the most sophisticated, scientifically detailed, scientifically proven way of developing power sport athletes. And that's what deserves the credit, is their research and their way of methodically figuring out what transferred to sport. And then you not talk to, because obviously I would love to have met him, but Anatoly Bondarchuk, the one of the great, he's one of the big three Soviet guys. But he basically came out and said to Joseph Johnson not too long ago in an interview that they really got the idea of steroids from the United States. We were developing and using them as performance enhancing in the 50s, but mostly with bodybuilding. And so they took them over to and experimented with them, used them in different times of the year, but not as the way that we kind of envisioned that they used it. It's pretty cool. I'm not going to get into all the things he said, but basically, the other thing was said is that back in those days, if you think that everybody lining up in the finals of the 1960 Summer Olympics for the 100-meter dash, if any of those guys were clean, we're very naive. So that's one thing that kind of, anytime I talk about the Soviet system, the Eastern Bloc system, I get not a lot of, but every once in a while I get into some pushback, but it was all the drugs. Definitely wasn't all the drugs.
Something else that you alluded to that's a pretty big deal with Soviet research is
Yes.
Here a lot of our research was done on sedentary college students.
Yes.
Their research was done on athletes, and their research had the full backing of the whole government who was trying to prove their sort of national superiority. So
yes,
their research is much more
no doubt, John,
relevant.
That and the money that they put into it was what we would put into cancer research and AIDS research combined. I mean, it was, but so back to the system, I just wanted to give a little bit of, like, it's like with football, it's not just the X's and O's that make this thing.
Coach, just to give them a little bit of context on sort of your background with it, he not only studied the book, but he has been implementing this for a couple of years now. And I'll let him tell you the story, but he's got it dialed in pretty tight from connections he made with some of the people that sort of started this whole thing here in America. So go ahead, Coach.
Yeah, and honestly, and I'm not just saying this because he's on the thing here, but we were able to completely unleash it after Coach Boyd came, because it's different. It's different. And I know I'm hung up on the Soviets, but in 1960 they destroyed the West so bad in the Olympics that they actually sent people to study why, like what's going on in the United States and England and Canada, that they suck compared to us. Is really basically, and it's funny because I'm kind of a dork. I got this from a translated Soviet journal from the late 60s that you can find them online. It's awesome. But anyway, they were talking about, they came back and said, because in the West, we have no set system for developing athletes, that if you went into Robbie's gym, my gym, Antoine, Matt, Mike, Maddie, everybody, we may be doing completely different philosophies. One gym, I know where my daughter goes, where I was actually started the strength conditioning program there. I've been gone almost 4 years now, but they're a big, like, high volume CrossFit type, which is kind of, but so everybody might be doing something completely different. And that was their thing. And the other thing that they found out was, and it's absolutely true, and kind of got me into a heated argument the other day with some friends, because I kind of retweeted something Joseph Johnson said, was they found that our background, as opposed to where the Soviet and the Eastern Bloc athletes are coming from, our background was our original way of getting into the weight system was powerlifting and bodybuilding. So we were taking powerlifting and bodybuilding philosophy and trying to push that into sports performance, where there are some crossing over. There's also some things in those ways of doing things. And, West Side's a little bit different. So, because they actually use a lot of Soviet, with their dynamic ever stuff. But basically what they found was, in our country, we spend too much time with heavy weights, moving slow, and not focusing on the main thing, which is getting better at the sport. We always want to get better at the weight room. And honestly, they said that in 1960. And if you think about that, and what everybody here knows, that's a reality in the United States right now in a lot of weight rooms. That the numbers on that weight room board are kind of how your sports performance program is being judged. When and don't get me wrong, because a lot of people think that I'm kind of like, I guess that I'm like an anti-lifting. I'm not an anti-lifting heavy guy at all. We max, our football program does 1 rep max. Our baseball program, their coach wants it too. So we're, we lift heavy. It's just the process of getting to those numbers and how we look at those numbers in comparison to the whole program are a little bit different in that. So how I got involved in this, just to give you a little bit of background, was I was at Dorman's South Carolina clinic a few years ago when Tony Decker spoke, who's the guy. He's a guy at Coastal Carolina, and he got up there and started talking about this volume wave system, and and it was one of those like moments where I was just like, boom, this is something here. I need to find out. I need to get into this. And so I arranged to visit him and spend a few days with him. And I knew I was probably onto something really. Well, the first thing I did was I went back to York and I started to do some things, playing around with just the things that I took from him and in our phone conversation. But then I went down to visit him, and that kind of started this whole trip into the whole world of Eastern Bloc, periodization and things like that. But so I knew I was into something good when we walked down and sat in his office, and he sat down and he said, all right, look, I'm going to share this stuff with you, and I'll let you write everything down, and I'll give you what I have. He said, but you cannot post this stuff or make any of this stuff public yet. I was like, okay. He said, and he went to tell me about Coach Parker and those guys that were writing the book, the system, and that that was coming out soon. They had been waiting for this Dr. Goldstein to pass away, and then these guys and I'll tell the story about what happened there, got together, and they wanted to leave that as their gift, what they had learned. So he sat down and over a couple of days explained this whole math equation basically and how to do it, and some things that about where to start with lighter weights and not, and I've heard Joseph Johnson say it, but Tony Decker said it too. And one of the big things is the way they look at it is your athletes will get an adaptation from anything you do to them for at least a couple weeks. So when your kids come to you untrained, 50% is going to force a strength adaptation. So then when that runs out, go to 60%, and then that runs out, you know what I'm saying? So it's a slow cooking process, but the key to this is you're trying to squeeze all the adaptation and transfer out of everything you can get, starting in a lower intensity and volume range, as opposed to the more traditional linear periodization, which is we're going to start with volume here and intensity here, and as the intensity goes up, the volume will drop. That, those two things aren't necessarily tied together. There are times when there's volume drop, and we can get into that later, but basically their question to us would be, why would you jump a kid that's 14 or 15 years old into lots of training in 80 and 85% when that will definitely make him stronger? You know that. But strength is the easy part. Any one of us right here could take a child and have their child, 6, 7, 8-year-old child, train their football team. And literally all they would have to do is tell them, take them into the woods, have them pick up a rock and carry it a certain distance to that next tree. And the next day, take that whole team out there, have them pick up a bigger rock, and just keep doing that until they get to where they can't pick up the rock anymore. And then make them go a little bit further. Well, now that's strength adaptation. That's the easiest thing in the world. Their way of looking at it was, why would you force a 15-year-old primary adaptation to come from 80 and 85% with that bar moving so much slower? Because what's going to happen is that 80, 85% is eventually going to start to wear off as well. And now you're going to have to go a little bit heavier and a little bit heavier and a little bit heavier. And yes, those weight room numbers are going to go up. There's no doubt. Those weight room numbers are going to go up. Anybody can make those weight room numbers go up. But is it making them better at the sport? The main thing is the main thing. Transfer to the field. And what they proved was, with this slow cooking process, you can improve your athletes with so much less risk. The risk reward of your young kids moving the bar with great technique at 65%, and getting stronger from that. They're still going to have strength and adaptation, but now you're getting some explosive power. You're building that bar speed, but you're also not risking injury. Not that heavy weights is going to, but you know what I'm saying? It's just, and the central nervous system. That's one thing that is huge in this system, is that you always are trying to figure out how to balance that central nervous system destruction that is caused by lifting. Even if a kid feels great after they hit a new max, they're shot. And they might be shot from having a great workout now for 3 or 4 days, when you could get that strength adaptation from the young kids a little bit lighter, a little bit faster, and then go back and lift in 2 days. So it's just so anyway, he's talked to me about this, and it just kind of went boom, like I need more of this. So I took it back and started to do some things, and it's going to be a battle, because the kids, the coaches, everybody is used to, I want to lift heavy, and trying to explain to them that it's coming. Like, that is coming. We're going to do some things that we're going to lift heavy, but it's just a process. So I did that for about a year with just Tony, who, I don't know how many of you guys know Tony Decker. He's an awesome guy. He's been all over. His wife is a physical therapist that works with him, and they met when they were both at the Eagles, and it's a good situation if you ever get a chance to reach out and talk to them.
Coach, where did he end up after Coastal?
He's, as far as I know, he is still at Coastal. Has he left?
I thought when they transitioned their
I
program,
think,
maybe
and
he
I
just
don't
moved to
know.
a different. Steve, you might know.
Yeah. So when Chad
I know he's
Scott,
not at Coastal anymore.
well,
Okay.
I think when Chad Scott got there, I think they kind of moved him over more to the Olympic side, and he kind of they divvied up football that way because his wife is still there. She didn't go anywhere, so
he's at least down in that area living, regardless of what he's doing for work.
And I send him, some information about, but the last I heard, he was just not working with football. But so he actually helped me connect with Coach Johnny Parker, who, honestly, if you've not talked to Coach Johnny Parker, you need to immediately, because he is a national treasure for strength and conditioning coaches. So Coach Parker, I go and see him at Dorman Clinic the next year, and I sit down and talk with him, and he told me that I had just read the book, The System, come out. I've probably read that book 20 times. If you read it once, you haven't read it. It's very, very in-depth. It's not like super training. Super training is like trying to take a doctorate or something. It's crazy. It's like 5 pages at a time. System's a little bit better than that, but so I got to talking to him. He let me know that that was kind of a compilation of things. So that was all of those guys. But the cool thing was he told me the story, and I'm going to share it with you just because I think it's a cool story. And Robbie, I've probably told you this like 5 times already, but it's about him and those Al Vermeil and those guys that were in the NFL, kind of the second wave of NFL strength coaches. That first wave was like Dan Reeves, and who was a player coach, strength coach. And the second group of guys that kind of came in the 70s and early 80s, they heard that this Dr. Goldstein, now Dr. Goldstein was the guy that all the system is based on, was one of the top Soviet strength coaches. Now, in the Eastern Bloc, there's no real difference between sports scientist and strength coach. They're the same. The sports scientist is a strength coach. Where here you have sports scientists and strength coaches, and they don't always. Over there, they didn't have the big pushback between the two. So he was Jewish though, and so he gets to the point where he can't advance any further in the Soviet Union's Eastern Bloc system. So he leaves, comes to the United States. These guys, Coach Parker told me himself, they were, and it might be in the book too, but he said they found him working at the Jewish Activity Center in Long Island, like the Long Island Jewish Activity Center, something like that. This world-renowned, it would be like if like you found out that Nick Saban was like running the YMCA. You'd just be like, what? Like, doesn't make any sense. And so they reach out to him, and they basically say, hey, we want you to look over our stuff. And he's like, all right, send it to me. I'll red pen it, get it back to you, and then we can talk from there. So Coach Park and those guys, they all, they're the NFL guys. They're the top guys in the country. They think that they got it. And he said, like 6 weeks later, they all get their stuff back, and it's just ripped apart, red penned, just like, you're doing it all wrong. Why would you do this? Why would you do that? So humbled, they reach out to him, and he hasn't come up. And his whole point is basically, you Americans and your powerlifting focus and your obsession with lifting heavy, which is actually making your players slower. So he kind of started to work with those guys, and those guys studied under him. And, it was a strength coach from the Denver Broncos, the New York Giants, Washington Redskins. There was a couple other teams. But if you think about that, and I know not everybody's my age, but the teams that were playing the Super Bowl when I was in high school were, the Giants, the Broncos, those teams, the Redskins. Those were the guys that learned this, and they just kept it a secret, because not that it was a big secret, but it's just something that not a lot of people would look at and face value and say, well, that's exactly how I would want to do it. So obviously it's spreading now, but so they got into it. Coach Decker had been reaching out to Coach Parker for years, wanting to visit, and he had to get permission from Coach Parcells. And he said, I can't remember if he said it was 4 or 5 years. They had actually moved to the Patriots when just out of the blue, Coach Parker called up Coach Decker and said, come on up for a visit. And that kind of started the whole thing for Coach Decker. But Coach Parker really filled in a lot of the holes for me. The system filled in a lot of the holes for me. And, the best story I got about Coach Parker is, and then we'll start talking about the system. I know I'm probably boring you guys, but I'm really long-winded. So I had not talked to Coach Parker since the clinic, so I saw him on Facebook. It said suggested friend. So I sent him a friend request, and like 15 minutes later, I get a message from Johnny Parker, and he says, Coach, I got your friend request, and I'd be glad to accept it. He said, but that would mean you would have to see all the stuff about my life that you really don't care about, and I would have to see all the stuff about your life that I really don't care about, when the reality of it is we just want to talk about strength conditioning. So why don't you just call me and, we'll start talking. And I was like, that's great. Then he sends a message back and says, don't be the guy that doesn't call. And I was like, oh, no way, Coach, I'll call. I promise I'm going to call you. I mean, that's Coach Parker. That'd be like if, like back in the old days, like Vince Lombardi had called up a high school football coach, been like, hey, let's talk. You're going to call him back. Well, I don't. And I don't know why I didn't. I just kind of was intimidated a little bit, I guess. I don't know. I'm starstruck by people like that. So I was just kind of – so then a few weeks go by, and I get a message from Johnny Parker that said, you never called. Don't worry about it, Coach. It's okay. You won't be the first person that said he'd call and didn't, and you won't be the last. And I'm looking at this, and my wife's sitting next to me, and I was like, I just got guilted by one of the world's greatest strength coaches. So.
Hey, let me say this. I met Johnny Parker at the play lab that they had in Pensacola, and I've had the chance to meet with Al Vermeil several times and talk to him about a bunch of the stuff that he did with the Bulls and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that dude, I mean, I got a chance to spend about 3 hours with him. I talked to Johnny Parker for about an hour and a half at the play lab in Pensacola. And I've talked to him about 3 or 4 times since then.
Yeah.
If you can get off the phone with Johnny Parker in a half hour, you are lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Because he'll ask you point blank.
He's got an hour.
What do you think about X, Y, and Z? I mean, he asked me about, he goes, because who was it that was with the Falcons? That was a strength coach with the Falcons, Al Miller. He goes, well, this is one of the things that Al Miller and I don't agree on. He goes, Al thinks that you can have a light day in the weight room, then you can have a hard day running. He goes, what do you think about it? I was like, honestly, I think a light day's got to be a light day. And if you're gonna have a light day in the weight room, you need to have a light day with your running, or or vice versa, because otherwise, all your body knows is stress. And he goes, exactly. And he's like, that's why I don't agree with X, Y, and Z. That's even in the book.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that dude is awesome.
Yep. He told me there's a lot of stuff that he says in the book, were not his words. So I just cut someone off. I'm not sure who it was. I'm sorry.
I think, Coach Hoover, I texted you back when this all first started and everybody started all these Zoom meetings. One of the first ones I jumped on was really not a big one. Can't remember which one it was. There's been so many. And about 15 minutes into the meeting, all of a sudden, Johnny Parker pops up as a participant. Just sat there the whole time, didn't say a word and listened. But this is a guy that he loves doing what we're doing right now. I guarantee you, if we'd invited him today, he'd be here.
You can call him any time. I mean, he sleeps in. Don't call him early. That's one of the rules, but he'll talk to you. I think he's got a 1 hour time limit, because we usually get to about an hour, and he says, all right, Coach, got to go. And then, but the last thing I'll say about Johnny Parker, but it's relevant. He's a great storyteller. He said that, I don't know if you guys know who David Meggett is. Some of you guys will, but David Meggett was an NFL guy back in the day. John, I don't know if I told you this or Johnny told you this, but he said David Meggett is a rookie, 83 or whatever it was. He came in, he was okay, very borderline guy, being discussed about maybe we can cut him, maybe we can. He was a late draft pick. Everybody's gone, and David Meggett hasn't left. He goes into Coach Parker's office. He says, Coach, I don't have anywhere to go. And he's like, you got to go home. And he's like, I can't go home. I can't go back to where I'm from. It's just a bad situation. I don't. And they said, well, you can't stay here. You know, it's against NFL rules. But he legitimately didn't have anywhere to go. So he calls up Dr. Goldstein and says, hey, I got a guy. Can he stay over there with you at the Jewish Center? I'm assuming he never really gave details, and train with you. And he's like, yes. And he said the thing about David Megan was at 183 pounds, he was a legit 600 pounds back squat. And so he goes for the summer, and they didn't have as many camps and stuff, I guess, back then. But he comes back for training camp, and he's an all-pro caliber player. I mean, just tremendously fast, quick, just a guy that ended up being in a Pro Bowl punt returner and things like that. So he calls up Goldstein, and he said, man, what did you do? And he said, you guys he's like, why would a 183-pound running back need to squat 600 pounds? To say he did it? And he's like, well, it's true. What they had done was they put 365 pounds on the bar, double his body weight, and they made him move it. They timed him, and they made him move that weight faster and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And basically that was his squat workout for the whole summer. Now I'm sure there was other things too, but Coach Parker said that was just an example of, you know, a lot of coaches, myself included. I mean, I would love to have a guy squat 600 pounds, but you know, the Soviet way of looking at it was how would 600 pounds make him a better football player? You know, I've had coaches, not the coaches I'm with now, but I've had coaches say, this guy needs to be stronger, you know, and they're talking about a guy that weighs 240 pounds and squats 445, hex bar, deadlifts, everything we get on the bar. He needs to be stronger. And, you know, my point would be, so is he going to be better if he can squat 455? Is that going to make him a better football player? If that's what he needs, then that's what he needs. But the main thing is the main thing. And there's a point where, you know, that is a negative return. And that's kind of the whole thing about the system. That's one of the philosophies in it that has really been a game changer for us. You know, Matt and Coach Boyd, you know, I can tell you right now, when Coach Boyd came in, one of the first things he said was, we'll have to see how things go, and if we have to make some changes, we will, which, hey, I don't blame him. That's what the head football coach should do. And we haven't made any changes other than to go further down the kind of the Soviet way of doing things whole. And I'm so bummed because we just started testing. And we were about to have some, and again, you know, I talk about, we all still love that max day. I know some people don't. With our football guys, I do though. I think football is a little bit different situation than other sports. It's that rah-rah group testosterone mentality kind of it's fun for them. The kids love it, the coaches love it. But we were about to have some really great percentage increases, and right before we went out, but and we've been following this. The biggest battle you're going to have with your kids on this is getting them to understand that you don't have to go to failure. Failure, you know, you're always leaving one in the tank at least, and that you can get stronger without it being super heavy. You can still have those adaptations. So I guess getting into the nuts and bolts of it, basically what you're looking at is the system, if you're not familiar with it, is it's just a way of progressing that doesn't tie volume and intensity together necessarily. It's basically a math equation, and I've actually sat down and I've put all these numbers into Google Docs, and you basically start out with counting your reps, anything above 50% for your major lifts, your squats, your pulls, pushes, cleans, snatches, RDLs, posterior chain stuff, and you put a percentage on each of those general movements, and anything that you do over 50% of max counts toward that volume number. So obviously, and the volume number that's the biggest for us and for in the system too. And Coach Parker said his belief is it's because it's the most important one is the squat. So, 25% of our total volume is going to come from squats.
Coach, do you want me to pull some of this up on the screen so they can kind of get a visual to go?
Yeah, if you want, yeah, you can go ahead.
What do you want? What do you want them to see right now while you're going? The slides or the
well, I don't want to go down this philosophy rabbit hole because we won't have time to talk about anything else, and I don't think that that's what everybody really wants to hear. So go to where it says there's a chart. Programming using weight, volume, and intensity, nuts and bolts on the presentation.
All right, let me get to that. Hold on. It's going to be.
I think that'd be a good place to kind of start to.
Hold on, I think. Yeah, here's where I want to be. This guy. Nope. This guy. There it is. Yeah, what slide?
Go down right above where there's a chart. So it's slide 7, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So the other slides are kind of the philosophies and things like that. Let me get back to that. But yeah, let's get that up. And I'll be doing this whole presentation here in a few weeks, but basically what it says right there, I'm not going to read the whole thing. That's just kind of an overview of why we're doing what we're doing. The Soviet research showed the number 1 and 2 points there are the big ones. Soviet research showed that increasing volume and lower intensities, those things that's the big point of takeaway there. Volume is the most critical variable. That's kind of the basic tenet of this. Go ahead to go to the next one, Coach. I got better information. So there is kind of the nuts and bolts in a chart, and I think I took this chart possibly right out of the book. So you see in there, we use 2 4-week cycles within each one of those cycles on that chart. We're going to slowly increase volume, and I'll talk about how we do that through the start of the preseason, and then we're going to begin to drop it. That's one thing, in season. That sticks with what most people do. We did something last year that was a little bit different than the norm, and we had such great success with it from an injury standpoint, and our kids staying explosive. That I can talk about that another time or later too.
Got the stuff you got from Coach Ab?
Yes. Yeah. I got the idea from Coach Parker, and then Coach Ab and I sat down and talked about it. But that's a whole nother situation. So basically what you're seeing there is that little volume wave, and then the intensity is kind of going up and down too. Go ahead and go to the next one. So we use a 4-week block, and this kind of gets into how we did it. So we use a 4-week block. Only the main lifts are counting towards the volume. So what we do, Coach Parker, I think there were 7 in the book, but we use squat, clean or clean variation, snatch or snatch variation, presses, pulls, jerks, posterior chain. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I guess we have 7 in there too. The goal is to start low and increase your volume by 10% per block. So that's kind of the basic. It's 10 and 2. So what I'm trying to do is in every 4-week block, we're going to increase our volume by 10%. So we're going to start, the example there is block 1, 630 reps. And now this question that was asked a little bit earlier before the presentation was, yes, this is with our advanced athletes. We block our athletes 0 through 4. We are blessed enough to have an 8th grade weightlifting class that our football coaches run. That started this year. They're doing all our block 0 stuff. So when our kids starting this year come over, we'll have a very short block 0 in the summer, hopefully. Of course, everything's going to be different this year. Everything, it's going to be back to general prep. But so then our freshmen come in block 1, and we're doing a lot of 1x20 stuff with them, some 5x5 stuff in season with them. Again, but then we get to block 2, they're doing more of a 5-through-1 kind of program. It's a little bit different than the Jim Wendler program. They're going to stay in that. As my thought process on that is that early general prep has to be really general. The 3 and 4, this whole volume periodization stuff is for strength, but what transfers is power. But you're not going to add a whole lot of power to a weak athlete. And that's kind of the component that I think people miss when we're talking about this way of doing things. Is I'm not putting, and Coach Boyd and Matt can both tell you, our young kids, I mean, they're not doing this. As a sophomore, we'll have some doing it, especially in the spring, most of those sophomores. But the beginning of their sophomore year, that's when they start transitioning to this. But, we have some kids that are juniors that are still in our block 2 because their weight ratio of strength to body weight isn't where we want it. When they hit those ratios, we put them in this program. Another question I got earlier was, do we do this? My ratios, we actually use a little bit different system than some do. We block our kids by position need and frame. So our ratios are a little bit different for our smaller framed athletes, our mids and our bigs. We do that because the thought process is, if you have a 160-pound kid, he's going to get to 2 times body weight probably pretty fast. Like, we have a lot of 160-pound kids that can squat 320 pounds. So we will bump that ratio up, for example, on their back squat. Whereas, yes, I do this across sport. The difference is, let me go back to the ratios and then I'll get to that question about sport. But if you have like a 280-pound kid, the chances of him squatting 560 are much lower. Not that we wouldn't want him to be there, but so we might drop his squat ratio down to 1.8, 1.75. And our mids, they'll be the 2.0 guys, because our mids are like linebackers, running backs, tight end guys that are probably going to weigh 180, 185, 200, 205, 210. Well, 420 is a reasonable goal. We've got a guy that weighs 180. Our freakiest, probably just weight room athlete, sprinter guy. Our best squatter, he only weighs 180 pounds, and he can legitimately back squat 530 pounds. But that's so far up above his ratio, we never go there unless we're testing. I didn't even have him go there for our regional weightlifting meet because he didn't need to. He won our region with 505, and my philosophy on it was, why blow his central nervous system out at 530, even though we know he could get it when he only needs 505 to win. And that kind of goes back to these philosophies. Is, you know, our receiver that's getting all these offers right now, Deshaun Brown, can flat out fly. He can jump. He weighs 175 pounds. He can squat well over 400. But is that really, you know, does he need to squat 400 pounds to be a great wide receiver? Probably not. So that's where we put those ratios in. From the other sports standpoint, I do with the other sports. I've got females are best. So the big consideration is this. I get my football guys, this year obviously not, but traditionally I counted it up. I have about 235 days a year with our football guys. I don't see them on the 4th of July, over Christmas break, over spring break, and then like right around graduation maybe, but I get them for that time. They are able to progress a lot faster. So we're going to get a bunch of our guys, and I break our block 3s and 4s into 2 different subgroups. After watching Tobias talk about cavalry, infantry, artillery, I really like that. Well, we may break it into 3, but I basically break it into, we'll have a block 4 volume and a block 4 speed. By the time they get to our block 4, I don't need strength. They're all, if you're at block 4, you're well past your ratio. So we break them into volume and speed. So like my Deshaun Browns are in block 4 speed. So they're doing ranged plyometrics, ranged lifts. There's no reason for Deshaun Brown to do a full squat with a bunch of weight because he's a top end speed guy. So he's doing some different ranges with all of his lifts. We have some linemen that need to be bigger. They're just in that 3-4 range. They're getting there, but they weigh 210 pounds. You know, our center, he's just undersized. He's strong. He can move a little bit. He's just undersized. I don't have any reason to put him into that speed group. He doesn't need to be any stronger. He doesn't need to be any faster to be a better offensive lineman. He needs size. So he's in a volume group. So he's doing, you know, if we're doing sets of 3 with some other guys for speed, he's doing 5s and 6s to add a little size. So football gets to be a little bit different animal just because of that. Girls basketball and some of our volleyball players are also in that same boat. Obviously they don't have the size component, but they lift year round. So I get them all the time. So yes, those athletes would be in 3s and 4s doing velocity-based training, doing some of our advanced, you know, special strength. That's one of the big Soviet, you know, things that a lot of people are doing now is the special strength exercises. We're not going to do a lot of special strength exercises with our 9th and 10th graders because they're not strong enough to need that yet. We're going to squeeze every adaptation we can out of those lower weights and those speed adaptations first. And then when they're strong enough, we've squeezed what we can squeeze out of those intensities. Now we'll have the special strength things on there. But there was some other, let me see if I'd rather look at the questions. The presentation is kind of secondary, but what are your ratios? That is on this PowerPoint. I can get to it here. Let's see. How's it looking at class setting? So we are very, very lucky in the way that we have our classes set up. We have a 9th grade football class, and then we have 2 varsity classes in the spring, and then in the fall we have all of our football players, varsity players, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders in one class at the end of the day. Actually, we moved at the beginning of the day, which was one of the best things we ever did. I was so thankful when Coach Boyd came in and said, nah, 4th block, they're thinking about football. This isn't football class. I need these guys to be strong and be able to move. We're moving at the 1st block, so when they get here, they can focus on strength conditioning and worry about football later. That was one of the huge things we did. So we got that, and then I get our 9th graders after school. So But to that point, we'll have multiple groups. My after school program, I think I counted 7 or 8 different layers one day. It gets crazy when you got volleyball in there. I'll have, they'll bring the 8th grade basketball over. I've got a volleyball player that's block 4 she's the same level as some of our football guys. And then I've also got volleyball players that only come when they're made to come, so it's kind of, you'll have that all over the place. We triphasic tempo workouts as well. We have triphasic phases. I'm a Cal Dietz disciple as well. I feel like triphasic is awesome because you can make that part of anything you do. Whether you are a Soviet wave volume guy, you're a West Side guy, you're whatever, linear periodization, or girl, right? I shouldn't say guy. Triphasic, we do 2 4-week triphasic phases in there, but we do all kinds of isometric things in our skill development stuff we do as part of our warm-ups. We're constantly 3 times a week we're in isometric split squats, just because of the positive adaptation you're getting with blood flow to the leg, just all that stuff. That's another topic, but yeah, we do all that stuff. Again, the isometric stuff, we don't do it a lot with our younger guys, but we actually do a lot more tempo work with our younger guys. And we're working that into our program. So did I see if there's any more questions that I missed?
Did you want me to
why am I not wearing a tank top, Steve? Because it was like 90 degrees the other day when that was awesome. COVID spoil, man. That's a whole new thing. But yeah, it was like 95 degrees that day. So that's why I'm not wearing a tank. It's only like 65 today. So anyway.
Was there a slide that you wanted me to pull up for one of the questions? Maybe, was it about your blocks or something?
Yeah, and I'm trying to click on there like I have control. Let me see. There should be the ratios in there somewhere. And then if not, I've got that. But nah, I'll have to go back to slide 9 and I can get that to you guys though. So, and those ratios, I got them originally from Gary Schofield, adjusting them a tad bit to our athletes. But the last time I talked to him, he's really, really, really looking into this Matt Ray research on net 1.7 for the back squat, and he says it looks pretty legit.
Saying 1.7 body weight.
Yeah, for the back squat, Matt Ray doing this. I'm telling you, I don't,
Is that RAY?
RHEA. He's the new guy he's one of the 2 new guys at Alabama.
Okay.
I'm telling you.
He's the new guy at Alabama that came from Indiana.
Yeah. Look out, Alabama, because, they just went from full go into the sports science realm of things that kind of Clemson's already been doing. And you saw where, what it did for Oregon, what it did for Clemson from, just being smart, and now look at the Alabama. They're going to be hard to beat.
Well, and with Alabama, the biggest thing that's been holding them back has actually been Saban himself, because he still runs the same practices that he did back in 2000, 2001.
Yep.
That he did when he was at LSU, and and Scott was caught in a bad situation because he had to do what he had to do just to keep his job.
Yeah, and getting blamed for the injuries.
He was getting blamed for the injuries, and I know a lot about that. I will choose not to say just because, but one of the things that I think is very interesting about the Soviet system, and I actually spoke to Coach Parker about this, is that if you look at a lot of the stuff that Charlie Francis did with his sprinters,
Yes.
for as far as the percentage ranges, he
Mhm.
said that for your sprinters, you sprint at 90% of full speed or higher. You never go below. It's like the 60-75 rule, 60-80 rule, whatever it was.
Yeah.
I've seen various different things on it. But that's actually where you lift with your athletes, and then you have them sprint at those higher percentages, because you can have a person never squat above 80%, but if they're moving it and you're adjusting the volume correctly, you can elicit so much more of a response and get them so
Yes.
much stronger and have a better strength base. That was one of the things I noticed that when I read the book and talked to Coach Parker about it, and he said that that was, something that Charlie Francis was actually onto, which is the reason why, he had, Ben Johnson and some of those other athletes.
Yeah. The thing that gets lost kind of is there's a, you want them strong enough, like strong is hard to define. Strong enough is hard to define. It's all in the coach's eye. And if you read that book, you'll, the answers those guys were getting at the beginning before they got into Coach Goldstein from people from the Soviet Union was the coach's eye, the coach's eye, the coach's eye. And they never really put together what that meant until they kind of got into it a little bit more. Strong enough is really in the coach's eye. You monitor the data, and when your athlete isn't improving his overall athletic development, one of the reasons he might not be doing that is he's hit that point where he's getting negative returns on strength. So, strong enough is a great place to live. The other thing, like you just said, John, was, you were talking about earlier, it's hard to go out there and sprint 90% and lift like that in the weight room. You're not going to survive if you do it that way. I mean, they're going to break down. They're going to start falling apart. And I can tell you one thing, last year, probably the thing I was most proud of, and I'm telling you, I really had little hope for very many wins for our team this year. I knew it was going to be a down year. Coach Boyd came in. He couldn't get in till late. It was kind of left in a real bad situation. And, we had kids move. We had multiple 4 or 5 Division I guys transferred, 3 of them to Clover. It was just crazy. We ended up a 500 season. So that was something to be proud of because the coaches did a fabulous job just getting the train going the right direction. But the thing I was most proud of was the lack of injuries, the lack of, soft tissue injuries, we had a couple concussions early. We had an ankle injury that happened like in the summer and it just kept coming back. But I think I counted 7 or 8 of our 11 games that we played where there was nobody standing on the sideline injured. None, nobody. Everybody was dressed. I mean, we had a guy that was out a couple games. They had to have a thing removed from his leg, little things like that. But, and, the conscious effort to sprint full speed and complement our speed work with what we do in the weight room as opposed to the opposite, I think was a big thing for that. But getting back to this, so kind of the 10 and 2 rule. So in our 4-week block, so like block 1, we're starting at 630 reps of volume, and that's divided up, and I'll talk about that in a minute, over each lift gets a certain percentage. What that allows you to do is, and we did this last year, the first time we maxed last year, we looked at our numbers and Coach Boyd said, man, our bench it needs to improve. And I agree with him. So I slid 2% from cleans, 3% from snatches, and added those 5% to push, upper body push. You identify, you can slide using this math equation around as long as you're in that 630 rep for that first one. And then, so our block 1 is 630 reps at a for the month at a relative intensity of 7%. So our block 2, our second 4 weeks, we're going to have a 700 rep volume and 72% relative intensity. And I'll talk about that in just a second. So your volume is going to be spread out. So that's 630 reps in block 1. Now, block 1 is after our GPP. So we had a longer general prep period because we lost in the first round this year. I can tell you, Coach Boyd wouldn't say this, although I'm sure deep down inside he knows it too. We got a run coming. I mean, we got a run coming. If we can get back to school and get this thing, our 8th, 9th, and 10th grade classes are absolutely freakishly loaded. If we can keep them together and keep going, we're going to start, our GPP is going to be shorter and shorter every year that we go on. I don't know if that'll be this year, but it's coming soon. This last year, though, our general prep started in mid-November, so we got like 5 or 6 weeks in. We do the 1x20 program. We come back for a week. We did not test them at the beginning because I didn't really concern myself at that point. We did some general prep again, and we jumped into it. So we're talking about in January, we jump into this. We did 2 blocks before we tested. So the second block, we were at 700 reps and 72% relative intensity. You spread that volume out, and it kind of looks like this, and it's up there. So you're going to have a heavy volume week. Within that, you're going to have a big volume week. You're going to have a moderate volume and a light volume. So you're going to have those 4 weeks. That's your microcycle, all right? And then that allows you to rotate, that kind of volume based on the week, and it allows you to really flow so you're not having back-to-back heavy volume days. And again, when I say heavy and light weeks, I'm not talking about intensity. I'm talking about volume. Intensity, you can have a light week later on down the road that's going to be high intensity. It's just the volume is going to be low. That allows us to have, we use a modified tier system, so that allows us to have, within that month, we're going to have a heavy, a big, and a moderate day in each of those volume ranges. So it might be a heavy week, heavy upper. And then it'll be, the next time around, it'll be heavy week, heavy lower. So it rotates through. And that allows you a lot of muscle confusion too. That's kind of a basic thing. All right, Robbie, you can, well, down the corner, that's what it looks like. So week 1, week 2, week 3. Day 1 is heavy volume. Day 2 is big volume. Day 3 is moderate volume. Then week 2, it switches. So let's just say day 1 is our pull from the floor. So we're doing our hex bar deadlifts, or we were just getting to the point where our block 4 kids and some of our 3s were getting ready to do straight bar deadlifts. It's a good thing. We've got some of the kids that have maxed themselves out on our hex bars, that it's at that point it's time to go straight bar, work on that technique, and change up on them. So you'll see that down that corner there. Day 1, heavy volume, so our trap bar pulls will be a higher volume. The next week, though, they're going to be a moderate volume, and the third week they're going to be a big volume. So it's going to go heavy, moderate, and back up, and then week 4 is all light. So all those would be light. So then day 2 is our bench day. Week 1 we did big. Week 2 we did heavy. Week 3 we did, so you're never hitting the heavy on 2 lifts in the same week. All right, you go to the next slide, Robbie. So here is where we go with it. The very first mistake I made was I did it exactly the way that Coach Parker first talked about it, and the system first talked about it, which was how they converted this for the football player was they went to 1,000 reps. Well, luckily I didn't get very far before Coach Parker called me out. I had set my original end goal, because what you do is you get to your end and you put your total reps, and then you just work back 10%, 2%, 10%, 2%, work back. That tells you where to start. So in your yearly calendar. So I said, yeah, we're working toward 1,000 reps. We're talking about that. He said, Coach, are you a 3-day-a-week guy? I said, yeah. And he said, Coach, you can't have 1,000 reps. You kill him. He said, 850 to 875 max. And don't be afraid to go a little bit lower. So I set our end for football at 850, and we work back. Now, we're going to hit that 850 with 2 blocks left, I think, with 8 weeks left before we switch to our preseason. So in that case, since we're not going up in volume, we increase our intensity jump to 5%. So that last 4-week, phase before we shift to kind of that preseason where we're changing more to power output, and we get a really good higher volume, nice intensities up in that 80-85% range with some of our lifts. We go 5% of our lifts in those last 2 phases are between 90 and 95%. So we're talking a couple of reps. Like we might hit, 2 reps at 91% at the end there. So then the volume breaks down like that within the week. You see, you've got a heavy day, which is 42% of the week's volume. And these days rotate exactly like – I'll see you, Coach. Thanks for stopping in. Coach Boyd's taking off. He already knows all this stuff. Anyway, he's in there with me every day. But the days rotate just the exact same way that they do the cycles. So you got a heavy day, which is 42%, and this is right out of the book. This was no different than what I got from Coach Decker. Big day was 34%, moderate day 22% of the week's volume. So again, you're programming for muscle confusion and for recovery. You're trying to get that central nervous system ready for that next workout. Like we said earlier, I don't know if Tony said it or somebody said it, but you don't want to ruin tomorrow's workout today, or ruin the next workout today, and that's what you can do if you're not careful. So that's what we're really focused on. So there's an example at the bottom, and I'm looking at my screen as the same thing you guys are looking at. So if you're looking at total volume, this is 800 per month, just even number. Week 1, 224 total reps. It would break down into your heavy day being 94, your big day being 76, your moderate day being 54. Then week 2, you're going to see a volume drop. So, you're looking at, in the whole scheme of things, week 4 is your light. So you're going to come back week 1 with a big day or a big week with 224 there. And then you're going to drop back down to 176 to get some recovery in there. And then week 3, you've been low. Week 4 is going to be your light day. So boom, you hit them with your big day. Or your big week. So that would be 296. And then you see how the heavy, medium, and light days rotate in there. And then week 4, 13% of your volume, all 3 days are 34 reps. Light volume doesn't mean light intensity. You're still going for that relative intensity, same 2%. So, that just might be, instead of doing 5 sets, you're doing 3. And I'll talk about how we use Prilepin's chart and how we use energy system development, based on sports and things like that. But you can go on to the next one. So, hey guys, this is, like I said, some of this is taken straight from the book. Some of this is taken from Coach Parker, Coach Decker, and some of it is just things that I've just adjusted. So there is exercise percentages. So like I said, if it's below 50%, it's just a warm-up. It's really a warm-up. So that sometimes if I try to keep things consistent, so like our strength tier, if I can keep it at 5 sets, I keep it at 5 sets. But if it's like 15 for the total volume, I might go 5 sets of 3 but have the first 2 sets be sub 50%, and they're working on technique and explosion. And then, so you can really, move this around any way you want. You can play with relative intensity just by how you put the reps in there. We don't count auxiliary movements. So, our tier 3, which is our volume tier, we get most of our pulls that, we do +2 of our pushes. We do pulls together with +2. So we got 5 pushes, we do 7 pulls. We make up for that to get to that 2-to-1 ratio during our tier 3 by doing a lot of pulls, pull-ups, rows, things like that. So we're not counting those. Percentages are variable to account for weaknesses. So if you jump in, you say, all right, guys, our squats, I can guarantee you that most of our athletes are bench pressing right now. I promise you. They're doing more benching than anything. A lot of them. We get back, we get into our general prep, our squats will probably need a little bit more. But you can do that based on needs. Like I said, we did that with our bench not too long ago. Strength movements, you see that you're in the 12 to 35 rep range with a plus or minus of 3 reps. So I will be anywhere between 9 total reps and 38 as a minimum max. When I first did this, the first year that I did this, I was so into that exact number that it can become hard at times. So when I talked to Coach Parker, he basically said, don't lose sleep over a couple of reps either way. If you only get 7 reps, you only get 7 reps. If you end up having to do 40 on a heavy day instead of 38, do 40 and just complement and just, figure it out later. So you see your power movements are 12 to 25, progress each from simple to complex. That's kind of how we do things. And that is one of the big things I was talking about earlier with the Soviet system of doing things, the Eastern Bloc. A lot of us already do this, but what you're going to see is more layers of progression. If you look at Dr. Eustace, who is American, but he's the expert. You'll see a big difference between him and a lot of coaches would be he's got so many different layers of progression before he gets to the main lift. And so we do a lot of that too. And you'll see that right there is the example of our clean progression. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layers. And to be honest with you, a lot of our kids never get to power clean. Philosophical thing. We're not doing cleans for strength. We're doing it for max speed and power output. And from what I've seen with our velocity-based and power output stuff, we get better power output from stopping with the hand clean. Some of our guys will still do power clean. Some of the guys still do, but you see on the right there's your ranges. So you can be anywhere between 18 and 25% for your squat, 18 to 21% of your cleans, press and jerks 20, pulls 15, snatch 7 to 10, posterior chain 7 to 15. Now our athletes don't all do snatches. They'll be doing variations. We have some block 4 guys that are doing hang snatches, but and to be honest with you, I started drilling some of our younger kids with it because I would like to get to those earlier if possible, but not everybody does it. I'm a USA weightlifting guy, so I'm a big believer in getting to those lifts. But
hey, question for you, Mark.
Yes, sir.
With your cleans and everything like that, have you done anything where you do a hang full clean or do anything like that for as far as seeing where your power ranges are with your velocity based stuff?
Yeah. So one day I just decided that I was going to take our push bands and I was going to take the real test would be to put less experienced kids on there, but I took 4 of our better Olympic weightlifters and I decided to try to figure out based on body weight ratios to power output, what exercises were given the best return on value. So I tested all those. Loaded jump, power output. I didn't do shrugs. It was loaded jumps, power shrugs, traditional clean pulls, high pulls, hang cleans, and power cleans. Hang clean gave out obviously the most power output. Now I'm talking, we had our 4 best guys, so they knew how to do it. Their technique was good. They weren't short pulling. That's the reason, and I know if Coach Boyd was still on here, he'd probably tell you he was right, that I was right. He gets frustrated sometimes because our guys aren't cleaning, but, I assure him that the reason we're cleaning is to develop power. If we're short pulling and not developing any power, then what's the point? We might as well do a loaded jump. And this is kind of the reason I did this. So the hang clean was right there, but within 10% of power output per body weight ratio was the clean pull, the high pull, and the loaded jump, all within 10%. So again, I didn't replicate that test over and over and over and over again. It's not a scientific thing. It just helped me put in perspective that, you know what, if we get a really crappy hang clean that doesn't put any power out, then why in the world would we do it when we could do a loaded jump and get that much power output? I tell the kids, and I tell some of the coaches too, adaptations aren't lift specific, and we all know that. I tell the kids all the time, your body, and one of the things we get when we get into RPR, I tell them, I think, John, you were talking about this the other day, we were talking about RPR. I tell the kids all the time, when you're in that fight or flight mode from looking at your phone because it causes stress, your body has no idea whether you're running from a guy that's chasing you to tackle you or whether you're running from a bear that's trying to eat you. It has no idea. It's not specific adaptation. So if the point of the adaptation is to develop power, then why would I do a hang clean that's not developing power just to say that I did it when I could do a loaded jump and actually get that adaptation? Now, that being said, we practice our cleans. Our 9th graders, at least once a week, sometimes twice, during our warm-up period, all have a bar or a PVC, and we practice hang cleans and hang snatches, RDLs. We go through the whole 3-position clean, take 5 or 10 minutes. But that's not part of I'm not trying to force an adaptation with that other than technical. We're trying to get technical proficiency.
Yeah.
When they can do that, well then, we're going to jump into it. So that's kind of my little research on that, was that don't get hung up on, we have to power clean, we have to hang clean. It drives me crazy when people are like, power clean is the lift of all lifts. It's a good lift, but your body has no idea that you're doing a power clean. It only, it knows what you are asking it to do. You can replicate what you're asking to do on a power clean in a lot of different ways. So, I don't really get too hung up on, I want them to get to a nice, pretty hang clean. That's our goal. But I'm not going to rush them just because, using the VBT, it showed me that if I can get within 10%, that's a pretty good shot. Because then there were with our Charlie Francis stuff,
Yeah.
That's one of the big things, Charlie Francis, 10%, 90% of something is enough. If you're above that 90% something, you're in a good range. And so that's, as long as it's not more than 10% drop, then I'm pushing for it.
Yeah. But I wasn't sure if you had any of your guys catch it all the way down to where they were doing like a full clean.
Oh, yes.
or
Yes.
anything like that.
I will coach them a little bit on that. But they just kind of, some do and some don't. It just kind of happens, if
I was just curious because I encourage my guys.
Yeah.
With my progression, I'll go hang clean,
Mhm.
knee clean, and then I'll I'll do some hang to a full, just because at some point in time,
Yes.
when they try to hit some weight, they're going to have to catch it all the way down in the front squat position.
Yep.
And like I tell our guys, they always ask us, well, and I had somebody, Stephen Oglesby,
Yeah.
one time he was like, Coach, why are your guys, catching it down low, and why do your clean weights, as high as they are? I was like, well, if you want to clean the weight, and this is one of the things that Gail Hatch told me when I was at LSU way back in the day, is that if you want to clean a weight, you better be able to front squat it at least 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And I front squat the crap out of all my athletes.
We do too.
And when we teach them how to do cleans, I want them to be able to catch it and go all the way down, just because at some point in time they're going to have to put it together. But I wasn't sure with your velocity-based stuff if you'd had any, if you'd done any testing on that. I just wasn't sure.
To be honest with you, I just we did 2 of the 4 guys. They did full cleans.
Yeah.
Khalil and Jordan, but that's a great question, and I need to go back and test that. Because that's another great question. Are they getting more power output from that? But like I encourage them to do that, and we front squat. Like, honestly, I'm to the point now where I know this is probably blasphemy, but even with Coach Parker, this would be blasphemy. But I would rather we all just do heavy front squats all the time, and do speed back squats maybe, or split back squats. But we squat just because it's an expectation, so we do it. But
I would personally, I'd rather front squat or use a safety bar back squat.
Yes.
Than use a split bar.
It's just so it's so hard to get. I've got good squatters. I mean, there's some guys that have earned the back squat, but there's some guys that just we should just be front squatting. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, I'm gonna have to look into that. I encourage them to drop under it because they're gonna get a better lift with it. And some do and some don't. Coach, you can go to the next slide. See where we're at. All right, so I want to get to this so we can get some more questions real quick. Relative intensity, if you're not familiar with it, is just there's the math equation right there. It's just set percentage by total volume divided by total volume. So when I say 72% relative intensity, that means the average intensity of all the movements we do was 72%. And that allows me to, so there might be, when I say relative intensity of 72%, that doesn't mean they're doing only 72%. They could be doing 77% or 81%, but all of their sets combined, over 50%, come up to a relative intensity of that number. So you see just in that, the little equation there, I'm at 75% times 4 in that last set. They're in a 63, so that'd be a 64% relative intensity. So when I'm talking about 72% relative intensity, you could see where you could go with that. My guideline is that the majority of our reps, when we get to the end of our cycle in those 850s, are between 70 and 85%. So there's our zones of intensities right there. So all I do is I take those zone of intensities right there and the adaptation we're looking for. We're looking at what time of the year we're at and what adaptations we're looking for. So, obviously, as we are moving forward, we're working up. And then when we get to the preseason, we kind of go back down to that zone 3 stuff a lot. But, and then I just combine it with Prilipin's chart, and it kind of just works out into the math equation. Okay, Coach, you can go to the next one. This was a question earlier about blocking. I believe one of Maddie's big questions was how we block our athletes. And this just kind of goes into it. Our athletes come into us, it's a multi-year plan. And there it is where it says, if you can get the adaptation you're looking for at 3x2 at 55%, then use 3x2 at 55% until it stops working. You know, when our kids come back, they're going to get strong doing really a lot lighter than they were doing when they left, because they just haven't been doing it, you know. And you know, every 2 weeks of doing something is, they might start, you know, where you need to go a little bit more. But, and I'm not saying we're going to stay at 55, but we were just getting ready to make a jump into our third block, and the relative intensity is going to be a little bit higher, so we won't be able to do that. But you know, I don't want them to get to their genetic limitation, and that doesn't mean, you know, I had a guy say, I've never had a kid not improve his weight room numbers every time we maxed. You know, basically, I've never hit that point. And my response was, I'm not talking about his weight room number. I'm talking about him as an athletic development. You know, what's his acceleration is, you know, if he's a skill guy, you're worried about top end speed. If he's a mid, you know, and you're a feed the cats guy, you're working about top end speed. But all those things, injuries, movement, how he looks, how he feels. New lifters spend the majority of their time in that work capacity zone 1 with an occasion to move into zone 2 and zone 3. Going above that with the majority of freshmen is a risk that has very little reward. There is not a whole lot of reward to having a super strong freshman. It just isn't. Why do you need him to be super strong right now? Because he's going to hit that strong enough early. I get that. But then where do you go from there with him? When you could keep developing that power and stuff. The major, like I put in there, the, you know, major certified organizations are warning coaches not to do that. It's just a lot of people still do, but I think that's changing though. I think this is huge. All these webinars and coaches talking to the coaches. I think a lot of people that eventually we're going to look back while we're still coaching, and we're going to be able to say, man, remember when there was that, when coaches used to just like max freshmen and stuff, like that kind of stuff. Like, I think that's going away quick. Our novice lifters spend the majority of time in zone 2 and 3. We use the even the Jim Wendler type thing we do with our block 2 athletes. We still use a 90% of max training max. So even when it says 90%, that's really 81%, you know? So occasionally our novice lifters will jump into zone 4, which is that 80 to 85%, but the most of their time is going to be in the 60 to 79. Our advanced lifters, which are our juniors and seniors, with exception, everybody has exception. I was talking to somebody the other day. We've got a freshman that is a defensive end, weighs 180 some pounds. He runs, he's consistent sub 110 yard fly, consistently 4.58 to 4.65, 40. He's going to play defensive end, and he is strong as an ox. Like I stopped him at 500 pounds on the hex bar pull. You know, he's one that will probably end up jumping a little bit faster, because I don't want to get him. You know, he needs to be bigger, not stronger. And he plays a position where it's nice that he runs a 4.58, but it's more important that he weighs 215 pounds and still runs a 4.6, because that would be something else. So, you know, we'll look at him a little bit different, but there's always those. But typically the juniors and seniors are the ones that are in that advanced zone, and we'll spend the vast majority of the year in our zone 3 and 4 with an occasion to train zone 5. And that's straight out of the book too. Zone 5 includes, you know, all that 90% stuff. We'll have our maxes. And then, Robbie, can you click on that link down there?
Actually, I can just pull it up. I've already got it up right here.
Okay. So this is So go to lift volume cycle 1. We'll sprint and jump volume. We'll talk about that. So there is our advanced athlete. That's like the base sheet for the next 4 weeks. You see our cycle 1 volume is 630. I got all our percentages in there. So it's supposed to round up or down. So week 1, we're doing 176. You got work capacity. These are our advanced athletes, so we don't spend a lot of time. Will you click on the 44, Coach, there, where it says under work capacity?
Right here.
Yeah. There should be a percentage in there. So 7%. Our work capacity volume 7%. So that's like one set in that 50 to 59% range. And then we got our strength and our power. I'm calling power that's 60 to 69% with it, and that'll dabble into the low 70s, and our strength would be the rest of the stuff. So you can see there, this is on a 4-year plan. This would be year 3 right now for these guys, but so they're already trained to be in that strength zone a lot, power. So then if you go down to where it says, Coach, at the bottom, lift volume cycle 1-1 at the very bottom. So then this is kind of how I program off of that. So you see I got 50 to 59%. So that daily volume, I got all the numbers in there. All I got to do is change the daily volume and all those numbers would change. You see how many reps are in each. And then down in this area here, you can see total sets, how many sets will count, meaning if we wanted to do 5 sets, but only 4 of them were going to be above 50%, that would basically be that. So you see I got blank. Anything that's blank would be where we would put like an auxiliary and within our tier. So you see they're doing clean pull jump right there because they're still in the early stages of the cycle. So we don't jump right back into doing the cleans. They're going to do a touch of that variation. And then there's week 1, week 2, and it just goes right down the line. So you can scroll down to so click on volume cycle 4. Click on that where it says lift volume cycle 4. It's a little bit different. You see a little S next to that. Notice the volume is down. Spring ball. That volume is May. That's the month of May. We dropped the volume to reflect the fact that we're kind of on an in-season program. I could be hard-headed and say we're going to keep going up, but, availability is the number one ability for these guys. Somebody said on that Tony Holler thing, it wasn't Tony that said it, but there was a quote that said, when we get to the game, I want our athletes to be 80% conditioned, 100% healthy. That's our goal. So we changed there, but then jump ahead, Coach, to 5. I think we'll start climbing back up. So there you go. So we jumped right back up. Now, we did that because I'm counting football practice as volume reps, So, and you can also adjust that. Like if you got guys that aren't getting a lot of reps in practice, you can adjust their volume individually, but this is the base. So we're back up to 875, which that would be for our top end, like 850 to 875 is the top end situation. And then you see how that works, and then we just kind of go from there. But I know that's a lot of numbers, but it's a real simple math equation. And everything's figured for you. All you have to do is input your exercises, because when you're talking about squat, that could be split squat, front squat, back squat, anything that squat variation, clean variation. press variation, pulls, so, all right, coach, you can go back to the APRE. We use that within the cycle to kind of do a plus set. So you saw where it had the relative intensities of all the APREs down there. So, if we're going to be in the relative intensity zone for APRE 3, then they would do that. So I put just how we do it is I want them to hit at least one APRE set for each lift within that 4-week cycle so that we can adjust. We kind of have a mid-cycle adjustment of their maxes. So that's how we fit that in there. So here's an example of our advanced program. So zones begin in the novice with zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, and progress. So cycle 0 will always be work capacity following the season. Like I said, we got 6 full weeks of that in there, 1 by 20. That was new for me this year, and I'll never go away from it. That was amazing. All the different movement skills practiced over and over and over and over again, and combined with the caloric intake during the holidays led to our guys all being jacked. I mean, those guys, all of them, got bigger. The way we trained in season, we lost very little strength. A lot of them, some of them gained strength, and then we were able to add. I was so excited about this off season. It's just a crying shame that it worked out this way for all of us. But I was really excited because the way our testing worked out, our postseason testing combined with our GPP, we were just locked and loaded for this off season. It's just a shame. But anyway, so you see we work up to 875 by cycle 5 and intensity zones for comparing cycle 1 and 5. That might be on the next. Yeah, it is. So there is bringing it all together. So there's the top is an example of cycle 1, and the bottom would be cycle 5. And you see 880 total. Remember Coach Parker said, don't fret about 1 or 2 reps here or there. So you see zone 1 for our advanced athlete, they are at 7%, zone 2, 27%, zone 3, 59%, zone 4, 7%. So then when you get down to the 5s, and you can't see it, I don't think, because the pictures are covering it. I don't know if you guys can see that all the way on the right, but by zone 5.
Guys, by the way, you can adjust your pictures to just be 1 or to be none, so you can see this.
Oh, I see.
Better.
Okay. So you see all the way to the right. I can't see it. I can adjust it in here in a second, but I can't. You can see that's in what we're doing in the over 90% is 5%. So that's actually a good bit of reps. And a lot of times we don't even hit all those reps. But you see our heavy week in 5, we could be hitting as many as 14 reps in zone 5 if we wanted to. Now remember, you don't it's just a kind of a recommendation, like a ceiling. You don't have to get to those numbers, so that's where we're doing some heavy stuff there. But you see, the goal is to get zone 3 and the midpoint of zone 4. I would almost consider switching. I haven't done this yet, but I'm considering switching 86 through 89 to zone 5. So we'll start at 86. That's pretty definitive research of the Soviets, and Bondarchuk talks a lot about it, and Mel Siff and those guys in super training. That's kind of where the bar speed starts to drop to the point where you're training a little more of your slower twitch type 2 muscles instead of the X's. You're getting to the A's, and now from an energy system development standpoint, you're actually training to be a little bit slower at over 85%. Now, why do we do that? Go over it just like anybody. You're still balancing the strength, and we all know that you're going to get strong from dipping into that zone 5. You just don't want it to be to the point where it's causing you to be slower. And that is why we only dip in there a little bit. But that's, I don't know why that keeps going on. But that is, obviously we end up doing a cycle 6, and then it's after 6 we start to drop to our more preseason. And to be honest with you, July, we're kind of taking a feed the cats, mentality towards that too, normally. And it's time to focus on speed. Like, it's great to be strong, but now it's time to move. And, my thought process on this going back, obviously we're not going to make any decisions. We don't know when, they're still saying, like, I don't know why, but our school is still kind of saying we're looking at beginning of May. I don't think that's realistic, but that would be nice. I would love to get 2 or 3 weeks back in school. That might change your philosophy. But if I've only got 4 weeks before the season, we're going to lift, but we're going to spend most of our time on the turf, pulling sleds, pushing sleds, running, and doing changes. I mean, because, I feel like the kids, I get videos of them lifting and stuff, but I feel like most of them, I mean, they're all lifting at home anyway. But what they're probably not doing enough of is what we really needed to do, which is move fast. And so that's where our focus will be, I would imagine. Oh, I got a chat question here. The Soviet system doesn't know how to turn off his phone alarm. That's very true. Very true. I'm embarrassed why that phone alarm's going off. My wife's got me playing this game and every 2 hours I'm supposed to go in there and like help her with her farm. So her farm is going to be in need right now. I know that's COVID.
I thought that was your reminder to not talk too long.
Oh no! I have no reminder for that. You guys got to be that reminder. But we're already going on like 2 hours. So scroll down one more, Coach. I was like, when I saw Tony Holler talk for 3 hours and 16 minutes, I was like, that's ridiculous. And here I am, 2 hours in. We're only on slide 15 of 18. So there is kind of how we put it all together. Pre-Open's chart is our guide. The goal is to stay in those ranges. So it really works out, So when I sit down and decide, all right, here's our relative intensity. Here's how I want to do it. I look at the numbers. All right, we need to get 19 reps in this relative intensity. We got this percentage. So I need 7 reps in let's say 70%. Well, you look at 70%, the range is 3 to 6. So clearly I'm going to need 2 sets to do that in. And, so it's really, once you get the hang of it, like the charts I developed, just for me, I can just go in there and, year 3 now, I can't just copy and paste the programs because I changed a lot of the warm-up things. And, I've gone down the Cal Dietz, Chris Korfis rabbit hole now with all the barefoot training stuff. And so, we're doing all those kind of things, but the basic program doesn't change, just all the little auxiliaries of it. But okay, you can go on the next one, Coach. Oh, so we don't even need to talk about that. That's a whole nother thing. We do the same thing for speed, but and jumps and things like that. So, but I guess we can get out of that, and I can, if you got any questions, I don't even know if I answered all of Maddie's questions. The whole reason we're here, I don't know if I've answered enough of those questions. So, I'll win this time. I'm taking play with eccentric. So I actually use time under tension as reps. So if I kind of we've been timing their reps, and one of the things we're doing in season is what I got from Coach Parker about we give them 5 seconds. We don't give them a rep range. We say 5 seconds to get as many reps as you can with X amount of weight. And that kind of gave me an idea about how long each rep should take. And so that's how I'm doing that. So if it's like, if they're supposed to be 6 seconds on the isometric, that would count as 2 or 3 reps in the volume. That's kind of how I'm doing that. So just to kind of keep it all within the number. But yeah, so I don't know if I did a very good job of explaining this. When it's kind of like when you first read the system, it's kind of like if you didn't know anything about this and just heard me talk right now, you're probably like, that is way too complicated. Like they're just let's just go in there and let's just. But you just have to like keep looking and keep reading. And I'm telling you, the bar speed of our kids, it's just some of those things, and the fact that our kid that did that did the 505 and really has gotten 530, the fact that he did that and never really, because of his level of training, we set his max. We actually dropped his max down to 405, and all his percentages were coming off 405 instead of 505 or 5. The fact that his max went up consistently over the last 2 years, despite the fact that he really doesn't lift heavy, he just lifts fast and powerful. It just really sold me on it. And it's just the further you get into this, the system is kind of where it starts. When you start getting into the some of the special strength stuff, and the fact that now we're doing a lot of Cal Dietz stuff goes, yes, yeah, our speed gets we are we time weekly. So I have the ability to look, and we've got all of our guys increase just about, like, you're going to have flow on your fly 10s. We test with our fly 10s, but our power output, our broad jumps, our vertical jumps, our speed, everything is faster. When I take a look at our junior class and their improvement from the freshman year to junior year compared to the first group I had come through that really only did this 1 year, it's really something, because that's what it's all about. Like, we're looking at speed as that's the data we really care about. Our ability to, we train all of our linemen. We split them into our bigs, our mids and mid skills, and our top end speed skills. And we're doing everything based on starting strength, acceleration, and top end speed, and how much time each position, this is for football now, spends in those ranges. So our linemen are spending a lot of time squatting deeper, jumping deeper, and pulling heavier sleds for shorter distances, because the only thing that we're really considered, 85% of what we're working on with them is that starting strength, those first 3 steps. Then our mids are pulling sleds at 50% of body weight, and they're doing more traditional jumping, and for the most part, and our skill guys, the guys that actually reach top end speed once in a while, they're doing a lot of pogo jumps and a lot of explosive top end plyometrics and movements that would be more based on top end speed. those are our goals, and everything we're doing in the weight room with that is feeding into that. So our actual, like when they say the main thing, yes, I can share everything. When they say the main thing is the main thing, our main thing is going to be speed, because the faster they are, the better they're going to be at everything else, including the weight room. So yeah, we have seen, that's one of the big things that we've seen is, I think our weight room numbers have been very good. Okay, Coach, I'm sorry. Thanks, and be in touch. Sorry I've run it so long, but if the weight room increases is just kind of a byproduct of this, our whole goal is a speed increase. So yes, that's the short answer that I make long. I make everything long. Is that yeah, we've seen a lot. I saw John ask a question about linemen. Where did John ask that? Oh, do you have your linemen do fly 10s even at shorter overall distances? Yeah. Again, I consider the lineman fly 10 as that occasional. They're only going to run 2 a week, so that's their. I like to dip a little bit even for the linemen in the top end speed, just because so they're getting that little bit of all 3 ranges. So the majority of their stuff is going to be shorter with a little bit in acceleration and a tiny bit in the top end speed. So yeah, we do run the flat 10, and they would be really pissed off if we didn't, because we set those, as soon as you set those lasers up, they're all fired up. So, and they love it. But anyway, Matt, you got any questions? Let's see. I was testing to see if Matt's still here. If he knows how long-winded I am. He probably went out to lunch. My volunteer. But
I'm still here.
All right. He's heard all this 100 times. You got any questions or anything, Matt?
As of right now, I don't think so. I mean, I've already read the book once. Definitely going to reread it at least a couple more times, like you said, just because it's got so much detail and so much information. But I mean, everything you covered, like I said, we go through a lot on a daily basis as far as when we work together. So I think everything was pretty straightforward.
I know Coach Landreth is reading the book right now.
Yeah.
Anybody else that's already read it? Or
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I think I'm pretty stinking smart, but when I get into things like this, I'm like, like you said, Hoover, I read something and I sit it down. I think I was texting with you, and I was like, when I get into stuff like this, sometimes I have to read it, put it down, do something else for a while, marinate, go back to it, read again, get your information. That kind of helped me just talk to you a little bit and just keep going back to it. I don't just jump into something as soon as I learn about it, because number one, I don't think I'm ready to implement it until I've let it stew for a while.
Right. Well, Tony, the big thing that Tony told me before the book was, he said, the sign of a coach that really wants to be growth mindset, and it isn't that they jump program to program to program to program, that they are always looking for something that they can build into what they already do that'll make it better. And that's all I did with this. I mean, we're still doing most of the same type of things we did. We're just probably doing them with a little more of a thought out process,
I think all of us are already manipulating volume in a way, but it's almost like we start typically with other things like intensity, and they start with volume. They manipulate intensity too, but it's just volume's the beginning, and what put the most emphasis on.
That big belief is, why would you jump way ahead with heavy weights when you can get the same adaptation with much lighter weights and still leave that genetic growth zone, leave some of that space in there. There's no reason to jump to G when you haven't said B yet, and it's just a cool way of looking at it.
Well, guys, this was awesome. I know we wanted to talk a little bit about blocking too, but I think we probably should call it at 2 hours. Most of us probably have a few things to run and do. But maybe we'll do another one on blocking at another time or something. I mean,
Maddie, before you go, Maddie, did I answer any of your questions? Because we can jump on a phone call too, still, if you need to.
Yeah, no, you.
Okay.
One question I have in terms of like the younger kids, and you mentioned how you spend a lot of time in zone one and everything. How, like, let's say you have a kid that comes in day one and you're referencing that zone one of like 50%, 59%. What are you basing that off of? Because they obviously probably don't have a max. So is that just like an RPE or?
Yeah, so they're going to go through the Block Zero program. They're going to slowly, after they do the 1x20s, they're going to start doing 5x5s. So they won't jump right into that. Before they're doing any of this, they're in Block 3. So I'm going to know before I put any athlete into this particular program. We'll know we'll know at least approximately what their maxes are, because we've done the strength, the general prep, the kind of my version of Wendler 531, which is like my favorite canned program by far, so. But all right, well, if anybody's got it, feel free to call me or text me. I'll talk about it all day long if you want.
And those of you that got on because I invited you, I can hook you up with his contact info.
Yeah. I got nothing but time right now. so yeah, reach out. But thanks, guys. I appreciate you listening to me. I know I'm long-winded. I'm sorry. But
no problem at all, Mark.
Yeah.
I
You
enjoyed
must
it.
have done a good job, because it looked like John started ignoring the other meeting he was in and stuck with us.
Hey, man. I go where I see something I can use.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, if y'all have any ideas for doing more of these, I know I had talked to Hoover and Landreth and a few other people about doing these before we got out for COVID. And then as soon as that happened and everybody started doing them, I was like, well, maybe now's not the right time because it's kind of overload. But even when we were still in school, I was planning on starting to do some small groups of, 5 to 15 people, pick a topic. I know Landreth is a Feed the Cats guy, and there's a couple other people that were, and I thought we might could do one of those, different topics, get a small group together and have some discussions. Let me know if you're interested. I have a school district Zoom account, so I can host them.
Sounds good.
All right. We'll talk later.
Thanks,
I'm gonna go
Thanks,
build the deck.
Thanks, Coach Hoover.
Yeah, thanks, Coach Hoover, for the invite.
Yeah, no problem. We'll see you guys.
All right, stay safe, everyone.